World's first jet airliner. UK's de Havilland DH.106 Comet. Disasters and shattered dreams. This book, one of a series by famous Australian aviation safety expert MacArthur Job, was a key resource for this video. Coming up now in the Microsoft Flight Simulator hangar is the freeware Comet 3. Unfortunately, no working instruments. The Comet was made in 4 versions, the Comet 1 being the focus of this video. At the end of World War II, the UK aimed to beat the rest of the world, especially the USA, by producing the first ever jet airliner. With the support of BOAC, the famous de Havilland aircraft manufacturing company was chosen to do the job, partly because of its success with the UK's first single-engine jet fighter, the DH-115 Vampire, which first flew in 1943. Rising to the challenge, in 1946, de Havilland began work on the 4-engine DH-106 Comet jet airliner. With a crew of usually 6, and passengers up to around 36 initially, 80 later on, it would cruise at up to 40,000 feet for 2,500 miles, 4,000 kilometers, at around 500 miles per hour, 800 kilometers per hour, about twice the performance of the best USA piston airliners. The Comet greatly reduced travel times, while carrying passengers in pressurized, quiet, spacious comfort. Coming up ahead of the aircraft is the former famous de Havilland Airfield in Hertfordshire, UK. 114 Comets were produced here from 1949 to 1964. Sadly, the historic airfield no longer exists, now subsumed by offices, buildings, homes, a university and parkland. Runway was in the parkland under the nose of the aircraft. Control tower, hangars and DH factory were where the buildings are in front of the right wing. De Havilland Hatfield Airfield 1948-49 and de Havilland Factory. The magnitude of the pioneering production task to produce the Comet, world's first jet airliner, was demonstrated by the long 3 years to get to the first test flight, 1949, followed by another 3 years to the first commercial flight, 1952. With enormous fanfare, the UK and de Havilland announced the Comet 1's first test flight on the 27th of July, 1949, and its first commercial flight, London to Johannesburg, on the 2nd of May, 1952. With strong interest and orders from around the world, de Havilland optimistically began design work on the bigger and better Comet 2 and Comet 3. But only 5 months after its first commercial flight, came the first of a series of misfortunes that ultimately shattered the fulfillment of the British dream. On the 26th of October, 1952, BOAC Comet 1, registered GLYZ, overran runway 16 at Rome's Ciampino Airport when taking off at night in rain with no visible horizon and a full load. As the aircraft became airborne at around 112 knots, it experienced a buffeting stall and bounced back onto the runway. During the late rejected takeoff, the undercarriage was ripped off and the aircraft skidded to a stop beyond the runway. Luckily, all 43 persons on board survived the crash, because the spilled fuel did not ignite. The Italian investigation concluded that the cause was pilot error, but further testing back at de Havilland revealed that the Comet had a nasty tendency to enter a buffeting stall at takeoff, if the control column was overrotated, that is, initially pulled back too early and or too fast. Comet pilots were then instructed to rotate gradually at a higher speed. But only 5 months later, on the 3rd of March, 1953, while taking off from Karachi's Karachi-Moripur RAF station, now Masrur Base, Canadian Pacific Airways Comet 1, registered CFCUN, the first Comet being delivered to the Canadians, overran runway 25 when taking off early morning in hazy darkness with no visible horizon. It was near identical to the earlier crash at Rome. But this time, all 11 persons on board died in the crash and resulting fire. including 6 de Havilland personnel on their way to help the Canadians. For extra publicity, and to help persuade the Australians to invest in the Comet, the aircraft was being delivered from the UK to Canada via the Pacific and Australia, rather than direct across the Atlantic. At that stage of development, Comets were not fitted with accurate attitude indicators calibrated in degrees, just the standard Sperry artificial horizon. Also, the powered hydraulic flying controls gave little feel or feedback to the pilots, and with no visible horizon, over-rotation was a strong possibility. Orders for Comets began to be cancelled. But there was much worse to come: 3 high-altitude mid-air breakups, with fire, while climbing, where all on board died. First mid-air breakup. The 2nd of May, 1953, 4:35 p.m. On the first anniversary of the Comet's first commercial flight, BOAC Comet 1, registered GLYV, en route to London, broke up in mid-air west of Calcutta in severe thunderstorms, climbing to 35,000 feet, killing all 43 persons on board. The first mid-air breakup near Calcutta was thought to be due to thunderstorms, which could have happened to any aircraft, but then. Second mid-air breakup. The 10th of January, 1954, 11 o'clock a.m., BOAC Comet 1, registered GLYP, the one that made the first commercial flight, while en route to London broke up in mid-air southeast of the Italian island of Elba, in good weather, climbing through 26,000 feet, killing all 35 persons on board. After the second mid-air breakup, near the island of Elba, Comet services were stopped, but resumed shortly after modifications were made to mitigate the risks associated with fire and engine failure. Structural issues were not considered a problem at this stage. Third mid-air breakup. The 8th of April, 1954, 8:05 p.m. BOAC Comet 1, registered GLYY, en route to Cairo, broke up in mid-air abeam Naples in good weather, climbing to 35,000 feet, killing all 21 persons on board. Comets were now crashing more quickly than investigations could be completed. After the third and final mid-air breakup, near Naples, structural issues were suspected. Comet services were again stopped. A formal court of inquiry into the last 2 accidents was set up. Wartime British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, now PM for the second time, directed that the cost of solving the Comet mystery was not to be reckoned in either money or manpower. Very considerable work went into recovering pieces of the last 2 crashed comets from the deep sea, especially for the Elba crash. These were sent to the famous Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough, UK, where an earlier Comet was being pressure tested non-stop in a specially built water tank since the second mid-air breakup near the island of Elba. Very intensive technical analysis was undertaken at Farnborough. It was finally concluded, in October 1954, that the Elba crash, the second last one, was caused by a tiny fatigue crack which spread from a rivet hole in the corner of the transparent fiberglass-covered window cutout for the automatic direction finder, ADF, antenna located on top of the fuselage, above the forward cabin and behind the cockpit. PIC shows the aircraft components retrieved from the sea for the Elba crash. YP equals GALYP, the registration of that aircraft. The investigation also concluded the final Naples crash happened the same as the Elba crash, partly due to the identical injuries. The first-time pathology confirmed circumstances of a major air crash. Both the Elba and Naples mid-air accidents, the second and third, covered in the investigation, happened in good weather. The earlier Calcutta mid-air accident, in severe thunderstorms, the first one, was not covered in the investigation, but it is thought it may have been for similar reasons, although a lightning strike was also considered a possibility. The aircraft in the 24-hour test tank finally failed, and although fatigue cracks were found around the ADF antenna cutout, the actual failure in the tank was around the windowed escape hatch cutout. Small cracks in this location were also found in the reassembled Elba crash aircraft. It is a myth that square passenger windows were the problem. In fact, the Comet's passenger windows had rounded corners and were quite similar to some modern airliners. The formal court of inquiry found no just cause to criticize de Havilland, as it proceeded at all times with known good engineering practice at that time. It was working at the very front of technology and paid a high price for its pioneering work. The Comet disasters led to new understanding of metal fatigue resulting from repeated pressurization of a fuselage, and new design standards for the structural safety of jet-powered airframes and pressure cabins, including the design of cutouts. PIC shows the structural failure in the window escape hatch cutout on the tank test aircraft. But the developments that resulted from the Comet accidents could not compensate de Havilland and BOAC. The 5 Comet ones remained permanently grounded. RAF Transport took delivery of a few Comet 2s, and a single Comet 3 test aircraft was produced. It was not until 4 years later, in October 1958, that the Comet 4 became available for commercial service, but only 3 weeks later, Boeing's newer, bigger, better, longer-range 707 airliner entered the market. The rest is history. The UK and de Havilland had missed the boat. Now, to finish up, enjoy some real-life footage of the Comet 4 and an AI summary of its belated, limited success. The Comet 4s were technological and operational successes but commercial failures. While they safely redeemed the Comet's legacy, pioneered the first transatlantic jet routes, and flew reliably into the 1990s, de Havilland only sold about 70 because larger, faster rivals like the Boeing 707 dominated the market. Following the catastrophic metal fatigue failures of the early Comet ones, the redesigned Comet 4 series was a triumph of aviation safety and engineering. Transatlantic first, on the 4th of October 1958, a BOAC Comet 4 made the first jet airliner Atlantic crossing, beating Pan Am's Boeing 707 by 3 weeks. Longevity. The heavily reinforced, thicker cabin design allowed the Comet 4 to fly safely and reliably until its retirement in the 1990s. Safety legacy. The extensive testing to perfect the Comet 4 led to the mandatory metal fatigue stress testing and limits existing today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.